This is Michael Royle, just doing the final presentation for the project. So, my question for the project was, why do Christians pass the unleavened bread, the wine around to everyone to represent Jesus for the Passover? Kind of to put some context into why I was curious into this question at all. It's because when I was younger, going to church with my parents, we would go to the Passover kind of like services, and they would pass around everything, and I really wouldn't understand why. And I didn't become old enough kind of to figure out the reasoning behind it. I was just always thought it was kind of random. So that's why I seek to answer out this question now. So the first source that I found was from a website called gty.org, which their article is The Lord's Supper, Symbolic or Literal. This is an interesting article because it didn't directly answer my question outright, but it was very good in helping kind of set the stage for this entire research that I did, because it set out the whole set the stage for what the Passover was, the symbols behind the cups of wine and the bread themselves, and it leads into the bread and the cups of wine, specifically stating that there's 4 cups and 1 plate of bread passed around to all the disciples, but they were all passed around so that everyone could take part in drinking them and eating the bread. And it kind of stated it in a way, kind of as a fact, something that I had never thought of before. So it was just passed around to everyone to be consumed. It's a pretty good resource. And then the second one that I had was from a website called gotquestions.org. And their title was, Why is there so much disagreement about Holy Communion? And this one is kind of unlike the other articles that I was able to find, because they brought in other kind of sects of Christianity into this equation, and kind of trying to explain why there's so much disagreement, because caused from the Passover observance. And it goes into detail how and why there's certain disagreements, but specifically regarding my question, it's like the other articles stated. It states that the cups of wine passed around so that each of Jesus' disciples could take part in drinking it or eating the bread. So it's just kind of like there's symbols that mean something that everyone had to partake in, which is pretty interesting. And then the last source that I had was from a website called therealpresence.org, the Eurochrist in Scripture. And this one was really, really interesting because the author, Marty Barak, he cites many different scriptures right from the Hebrew Bible that relate to the whole Passover observance. And one of those scriptures that I found interesting regarding my question was Matthew 26:39, stating, My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. So it kind of directly relates to my question in my head, and kind of just building on the other sources, just those symbols were passed around, so I've taken them and observed them. That's kind of what it's built on today, the same practices. So moving on, then my analysis of my sources, unfortunately all my sources weren't fully credible, because none of them were backed by any accredited groups of people, scholars. They really didn't have any references. And the first one, gty.org, stands for Grace to You, which is kind of like a slogan that they have. I put a screenshot of it on the screen here, but you can kind of see they have all of their social links and things like that. So I just stated that as a company bias, because they're trying to push their narrative, kind of their brand behind this article that they released. So in my head, that puts some bias into what they are saying, kind of to push the narrative that their website has been doing for a while. And again, it wasn't credible because there wasn't even a reference list to this article. And then moving on to my second source, it was the same thing. It wasn't credible. There was no references. And it was pretty similar to the first one in terms of they just had things that they wanted to push. They had related topics which really didn't even tie in. It wanted you to just spend more time on their website to interact with their brand, kind of pushing that bias that they had. Not necessarily these first two sources weren't biased in what they were saying. This gotquestions.org was more biased because they presented different denominations of Christianity into their topic, specifically like Catholic versus another one. Forgot the name of it, but yeah, kind of presenting some of the bias in there and comparing them directly. Not credible. Then moving on to the last one, from the realpresence.org. This one's pretty interesting because I found the bias kind of to be neutral and more objective. The author, Mr. Barak, seemed like he was being more objective with the information that he was trying to present, because he was just citing things from the Holy Scriptures. But as far as the credibility goes, it's the same as the other ones. He didn't even have any references, nothing like that, sources, nothing like that to prove credibility. So in conclusion, what I found from all of these sources, the answer to my question is the cups of wine and leavened bread are passed around today to symbolize what they meant in Jesus' day so that they can be observed. Back in the day, they were passed around so they could, literally drink and eat the wine and the bread. But now it seems like it's passed around to observe what they did back in that day, which is, it was really cool to figure that out because that was really a burning question in my head when I was younger. So that was pretty cool, and it makes a lot of sense now that I gathered all the information and things. And specifically regarding the gathering of the information, it made me realize that credible religious sources are very hard to find, because a lot of them just have this, narrative they're trying to push for their own gain, for their own church, denomination, whatever the case may be. But also there's not many scholarly backing or accredited groups of people backing these articles most of the time. So it's pretty hard to find credible sources. So in conclusion, the cups of wine, they're passed around today just to observe the practices that Jesus did in his day.